back with part 3 of this week's reading of the Messianic Jewish Family Bible, Tree of Life version, TLV. And I had to pause it quickly because I realized we were pretty far up there in the numbers. It was like 24 and a half minutes. And I'm hoping that that last part actually uploads all intact. So I'm going to continue with the reading of chapter 19. Then the king said to him, "Why do you still speak of your affairs? I have decreed you and Ziba shall divide the land. So let him take all." Mephibosheth replied to the king, "As long as my lord the king has come back to his own home in Shalom." Then Barzillai the Gileadite came down from Rogelim, and he approached the Jordan with the king to escort him over the Jordan. Now Barzillai was a very aged man, 80 years old, and he had provided for the king during his residence at Mahanaim, for he was a very wealthy man. The king said to Barzillai, "Cross over with me, and I will provide for you with me in Jerusalem." But Barzillai said to the king, "How many years are left of my life that I should go up with the king to Jerusalem? I am now 80 years old. Can I distinguish between good and bad? Can your servant taste what I eat or what I drink? Can I listen any more to the voice of singing men and women? Why then should your servant be yet a burden to my lord the king? Your servant would merely cross over the Jordan with the king, but why should the king reward me with such a reward? Please let your servant go back and let me die in my own hometown, near the grave of my father and my mother. But look, here is your servant Chimham. Let him cross over with my lord the king, and do for him what seems good in your eyes." Then the king answered, "Chimham will cross over with me, and I will do for him what seems good in your eyes. Whatever you ask of me, I will do for you." When all the people had crossed over the Jordan, and as the king was about to cross over, the king kissed Barzillai and blessed him, so he returned to his own place. Then the king crossed over to Gilgal, and Chimham and all the people of Judah crossed over with him, and also half the people of Israel escorted the king over. Then all of the men of Israel came to the king and said to him, "Why did our brothers, the men of Judah, steal you away by escorting the king and his household over the Jordan along with all David's men that were with him?" Then all the men of Judah answered the men of Israel, "Because the king is our close relative. So why are you angry over this matter? Have we eaten at all at the king's cost, or has he given us any gifts?" Then the men of Israel answered the men of Judah and said, "We have 10 shares in the king, so in David we have even more than you. Why then did you despise us? Weren't we the first to speak of restoring our king?" Yet the words of the men of Judah were harsher than the words of the men of Israel. And that's the end of chapter 19. Chapter 20, Joab the Terminator. Now a worthless fellow happened to be there, a Benjamite named Sheba, son of Bichri. He blew the shofar and said, "We have no portion in David, no inheritance in the son of Jesse. Every man to his tent, O Israel." So all the men of Israel withdrew from following David and following Sheba, son of Bichri, and that's Bichri. But the men of Judah kept close to their kingdom, the Jordan, to Jerusalem. Now when David arrived at his palace in Jerusalem, the king took the 10 women, the concubines whom he had left to take care of the palace, and put them in a guarded house. He provided for them, but he did not cohabitate with them. So they were confined until the day they died, living in widowhood. Then the king said to Amasa, "Summon to me the men of Judah within 3 days, and be here yourself. So Amasa went to summon Judah, but he took longer than the set time that he had allotted him. Then David said to Abishai, "Now Sheba, son of Bichri, will do us more harm than Absalom. So take your Lord's servant and pursue him, lest he find for himself fortified cities and escape from our sight." So Joab's men went after him along with the the Cherethites and the Pelethites, and all the mighty men, and set out from Jerusalem to pursue Sheba, son of Bichri. When they were at the great stone that is in Gibeon, Amasa came to meet them. Now Joab was dressed in his military uniform, and over it was a belt with a sword in its sheath fastened on its waist, and as he stepped forward, it fell out. Then Joab said to Amasa, Is it well with you, my brother? With his right hand Joab took Amasa by the beard to kiss him, but Amasa took no heed to the sword that was in Joab's other hand. So he stabbed him with it in the groin and poured out his entrails to the ground, and did not strike him again, for he died. Then Joab and his brother Abishai pursued Sheba son of Bichri. Meanwhile one of Joab's young men stood over Amasa and said, Whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David, let him follow Joab. Yet Amasa lay wallowing in his blood in the midst of the highway. So when the men saw that all the people stood still, he dragged Amasa from the highway into the field and threw a garment over him, because he saw that everyone passing by him paused. Once he removed him from the highway, everyone passed on, following Joab to pursue Sheba son of Bichri. Now he went through all the tribes of Israel to Abel and Beth Makkah, and all the Berites gathered together and indeed followed him. They came and besieged him in Abel of Beth Makkah, and cast up a siege ramp against the city. It stood against the outer fortification, and all the people with Joab battered the wall in order to topple it. Then a wise woman cried out from the city, Listen, listen! Please tell Joab to come over here that I may speak with him. When he approached her, the woman asked, Are you Joab? I am, he answered. Then she said to him, Listen to the words of your handmaid. I'm listening, he answered. Then she spoke up, saying, They used to say in old time, They shall surely seek counsel at Abel, and that's how they settled any dispute. I am of those who are peaceable and faithful in Israel. Are you seeking to destroy a mother city in Israel? Why would you devour Adonai's inheritance? Joab replied, saying, Never. Far be it from me that I would devour up or ruin. The matter is not so, but a fellow from the hill country of Ephraim, Sheba son of Bichri, his name, has lifted up his hand against King David. Give him up alone, and I will withdraw from the city. So the woman replied to Joab, Look here, his head will be thrown to you over the wall. Then the woman approached all the people wisely, so they cut off the head of Sheba son of Bichri and threw it over to Joab. He then blew the shofar, and they were dismissed from the city, each to his tent. Then Joab returned to Jerusalem to the king. Now Joab remained over all the army of Israel. Benaiah son of Jehoiada was over the Cherethites and the Pelethites. Adoram was over the forced labor. Jehoshaphat son of Ahilud was the recorder. Sheba was the scribe. Zadok and Abiathar were Kohanim, and Ira the Jerite also was Kohen to David. And that's the end of chapter 20. Chapter 21, Justice for the Gibeonites. Now there was a famine in the days of David for 3 years, year after year, so David sought the face of Adonai. Adonai replied, It is because of Saul and his bloody house, for he put the Gibeonites to death. So the king summoned the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not of Bani Israel, but a remnant of the Amorites. However, Bani Israel had sworn a covenant with them, yet Saul had tried to eradicate them in his zeal to Bani Israel and Judah. David asked the Gibeonites, What should I do for you? How may I make atonement so that you would bless the inheritance of Adonai? The Gibeonites said to him, It is not a matter of silver or gold between us and Saul or his house, nor it is our right to put any man to death in Israel. Whatever you say, I will do for you, he said. Then they said to the king, The man who consumed us and plotted against to annihilate us from remaining in any of Israel's territory, let 7 men of his sons be given over to us, and we will hang them up before Adonai at Gibeah of Saul, Adonai's chosen. I will give them over, the king said. Then the king spared Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, son of Saul, because of Adonai's oath that was between them, between David and Jonathan, son of Saul. But the king took the two sons of Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, whom she bore to Saul, Armoni and Mephibosheth. It's another Mephibosheth. Also the 5 sons of Michal, daughter of Saul, whom she bore to Adriel, son of Barzillai the Maholathite, and he gave them into the hands of the Gibeonites. So they hanged them on a hill before Adonai, so that all 7 fell together. They were put to death during the days of harvest, at the beginning of the barley harvest. Then Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, took sackcloth and spread it on the rock for herself from the beginning of harvest until the rain poured on them from the sky. She did not let the birds of the sky rest on them by day, nor the beasts of the field by night. David was told what Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, the concubine of Saul, had done. So David went and took the bones of Saul and the bones of his son Jonathan from the men of Jabesh Gilead, who had stolen them from the open square of Beth-shan, where the Philistines had hanged them on the day that the Philistines killed Saul in Gilboa. He had the bones of Saul and the bones of his son Jonathan brought up from there, and they gathered the bones of those who were hanged. So they buried the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan in the country of Benjamin and Zelah, in the tomb of his father Kish. They did all of what the king commanded. Afterwards, God was moved by prayer for the land. Once again, the Philistines made war with Israel, so David went down with his servants and fought against the Philistines. But David became weary, so Ishbi-Benob, who was a descendant of Rapha, whose spear weighed 300 shekels of bronze, who was girded with new armor, thought to kill David. But Abishai, son of Zeruiah, came to his aid, struck the Philistine, and killed him. Then the men of David swore to him, saying, "You must not go out with us to battle any more. You must not quench the lamp of Israel." Now it came to pass after this that there was war again with the Philistines at Gob, and Sibbecai the Hushathite killed Saph, a descendant of the Rapha. Then there was war again with the Philistines at Gob, and Elhanan, son of Jer-Oregim the Bethlehemite, killed Goliath the Gittite. His spear had a shaft like a weaver's beam. Once again there was a war at Gath, where there was a champion that on every hand 6 fingers and on every foot 6 toes, a total of 24, and he was also a descendant of the Rapha. When we're talking about Rapha, we're talking about giants here. They were not all gone. When he taunted Israel, Jonathan, son of David's brother, Shimei, killed him. So Jonathan, son of David's brother, killed another giant. These 4 were born to the Rapha and Gath, and they fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants. So then, that is the end of chapter 21. And chapter 22, we have David's Song of Valor and Last Words. David spoke to Adonai the words of this song in the day that Adonai delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. He said, "Adonai is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God is my rock, in him I take refuge. My shield, my horn of salvation, my stronghold and my refuge. My Savior, you saved me from violence. I called upon Adonai worthy of praise, and I was rescued from my enemies. For waves of death encompassed me. Torrents of Belial overwhelmed me. Cords of death entangled me. Snares of death came before me. In my distress I called upon Adonai. Yes, I called to my God. From his temple he heard my voice. My cry came into his ears. Then the earth rocked and quaked. The foundation of heaven trembled. They reeled because he was angry. Smoke rose from his nostrils and consuming fire from his mouth. Coals blazed from him. He parted the heavens and came down with thick darkness under his feet. He rode upon a cherub and flew. He was seen on the wings of the wind. He made darkness as a sukkah around him, a mass of waters, thick clouds of the skies. Out of the brilliance before him, coals of fire flamed out. Adonai also thundered from heaven, and Elion gave forth his voice. He shot arrows and scattered them, lightning bolts and routed them. Then the ravens of the sea appeared. The foundations of the world were exposed by the rebuke of Adonai, and a blast of the breath of his nostrils. He reached down from on high, and he took hold of me. He drew me out of the mighty waters. He delivered me from my powerful enemy, from those who hated me. For they were much stronger than me. They came against me in the day of my calamity. But Adonai was my support. He brought me out to a wide open place. He rescued me, since he delighted in me. Adonai rewarded me for my righteousness. For the cleanness of my hands he repaid me. For I kept the ways of Adonai, and did not turn wickedly from my God, for all his judgments are before me. As for his rulings, I do not turn away from them. I also had integrity with him, and kept myself from my sin. So Adonai rewarded me for my righteousness, according to my cleanness in his eyes. With the loyal you deal loyally, with the blameless you are blameless. With the pure you show yourself pure, but with the crooked you showed yourself shrewd. You save lowly people, but your eyes are on the haughty. You will humble them, for you are my lamp, Adonai. Adonai shines in my darkness. For with you I rush on a troop. With my God I can leap over a wall. As for God, his way is perfect. The word of Adonai is pure. He is a shield to all who take refuge in him. For who is God beside Adonai? And who is a rock beside our God? God is my strong fortress, and he keeps my way blameless. He makes my legs like a deer, and sets me on my heights. Who trains my hands for battle, so my arms can bend a bronze bow. You gave me your shield of salvation, and your answering has made me great. You broaden my steps beneath me, so my feet have not slipped. I pursue my enemies and destroy them. I will not return till they are consumed. I consume them and crush them till they cannot rise. Yes, they fall beneath my feet. You girded me with strength for battle. You made those rising up against me bow down before me. You also made my enemies turn their backs to me. I cut off those who hate me. They looked, but there was none to save. To Adonai, but he did not answer to them. Then I beat them as the dust of the earth. I stamped and crushed them like the mud of the streets. You free me from strifes of my people. You kept me as head of the nations. People I did not know were serving me. Children of foreigners cringe before me. As soon as they hear me, they obey me. Children of foreigners lose heart and come trembling from their hideouts. Adonai lives, and blessed be my rock. Exalted be God, the rock of my salvation, God. He gives me vengeance and brings down people under me. He brings me out from my enemies. Indeed, you lift me up above those who rise up against me. You deliver me from the violent man. Therefore, I praise you among the nations, Adonai, and will sing praises to your name. He is a tower of salvation to his king. He shows loyal love to his anointed, to David, and to his seed forever. And that's the end of chapter 22. And in the footnote, there's a passage in Luke 1. I'm going to start with 68. Blessed be Adonai, God of Israel, for he has looked after his people and brought them redemption. He has raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David, just as he spoke by the mouth of his holy prophets from ages past. That salvation from our enemies and from the hand of those who hate us. And that is verses 68 to 71. So I just wanted to touch on that footnote. And there were two there was a word, sukkah, that was mentioned in chapter 22, and those are temporary booths. We actually touch on that when we talk about tabernacles. And the children of Israel, when they were in the wilderness, they had made temporary shelter booths. They called them booths, or temporary dwelling places, that gave them shelter. So sukkah are known as temporary booths. And also, I mentioned Elyon is the god. Elyon was mentioned here, and that is the God Most High. So that's just describing God. So I am going to come back with the next part, and I think we'll be able to finish chapter 23 and 24, and then I'm going to do a recap. But we're already past 21 minutes here, so I'm going to cut this part and come back with the next part.